Welcome to True Crime Talks, where the darkest secrets come to light. Today we unravel the chilling story of a bride who discovered, on her wedding day, that her fiancé had killed her ex. Ariana and Noah's love story began like something out of a romantic movie. They met at a cozy little coffee shop on a rainy afternoon. Ariana had been rushing to meet a friend, her arms full of books, when she accidentally bumped into Noah, spilling his latte all over his shirt. Instead of getting angry, he laughed it off and insisted on buying her a coffee to make up for the inconvenience. They ended up talking for hours, and from that day on, they were inseparable. Noah was everything Ariana had ever wanted in a partner: kind, funny, and incredibly thoughtful. He remembered the little things, like her favorite flower, lilies, and how she took her coffee with a splash of almond milk and a hint of cinnamon. He was the kind of man who showed up unexpectedly with her favorite dessert after a long day, or surprised her with handwritten notes tucked into her bag. Their relationship moved quickly, but it felt natural. Within 6 months, they were talking about their future together. Noah was the first person Ariana had truly opened up to since her breakup with Henry, her ex-boyfriend. Henry had been her first love, and their relationship had been intense and all-consuming. But it had also been tumultuous, filled with arguments and misunderstandings. When Henry disappeared without a trace 2 years ago, Ariana was left heartbroken and full of questions. The police had no leads, and eventually the case went cold. Ariana had tried to move on, but the mystery of Henry's disappearance haunted her. Meeting Noah felt like a fresh start, a chance to leave the past behind and build a new life. Noah was patient and understanding about Ariana's past. He never pushed her to talk about Henry, but he was always there to listen when she brought him up. He seemed to genuinely care about her healing process, and Ariana felt safe with him in a way she hadn't with anyone else. When Noah proposed during a weekend getaway to the mountains, Ariana didn't hesitate to say yes. The proposal was perfect. A sunset picnic, a ring hidden in a box of her favorite chocolates, and Noah's heartfelt words about how much she meant to him. Ariana felt like she was finally getting the happy ending she deserved. The months leading up to the wedding were a blur of excitement and planning. Ariana's friends and family adored Noah, and everyone commented on how lucky she was to have found someone so perfect. Noah was involved in every detail of the wedding, from choosing the venue to picking out the flowers. He even surprised Ariana by learning how to dance so they could have a memorable first dance together. To the outside world, they were the ideal couple, destined for a lifetime of happiness. But there were moments, small and fleeting, when Ariana noticed something off about Noah. Sometimes he would get unusually quiet, his cheerful demeanor replaced by a distant, almost cold expression. When she asked him about it, he would brush it off, blaming stress or work. There were also times when he seemed overly curious about Henry, asking questions that felt a little too probing. Ariana chalked it up to Noah's protective nature and his desire to understand her past. She never imagined that his interest in Henry was anything more than concern for her well-being. As the wedding day approached, Ariana couldn't shake a strange feeling in the pit of her stomach. It wasn't nerves about marrying Noah, she was sure he was the one. It was more like a sense of unease, as if something was lurking just beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. She told herself it was just pre-wedding jitters, but deep down, she couldn't ignore the nagging thought that there was more to Noah than met the eye. Little did she know, her instincts were about to lead her to a truth so shocking it would change her life forever. Henry had been Ariana's first love, and their relationship was the kind of passionate, all-consuming romance that left a permanent mark on her heart. They met in college, where Henry was the charming, slightly reckless guy who always had a crowd around him. Ariana was drawn to his energy, his confidence, and the way he made her feel like she was the most important person in the room. Their relationship was intense from the start, filled with late-night conversations, spontaneous road trips, and a deep connection that Ariana had never experienced before. But it wasn't without its challenges. Henry had a temper, and their arguments could be explosive. Still, Ariana believed in their love and thought they could work through anything. The turning point came when Henry started acting strangely. He became more secretive, disappearing for days at a time without explanation. When Ariana confronted him, he would brush her off, saying he needed space or that he was dealing with personal issues. She tried to be understanding, but the distance between them grew. Then, one day, Henry vanished completely. At first, Ariana thought he just needed time alone, but as days turned into weeks with no word from him, she began to panic. She called his friends, his family, and even his co-workers, but no one had seen or heard from him. It was as if he had disappeared off the face of the earth. Ariana filed a missing persons report and the police launched an investigation. They searched Henry's apartment, but there were no signs of a struggle or anything out of the ordinary. His phone, wallet, and keys were all gone, suggesting he had left willingly. But that didn't make sense to Ariana. Henry wouldn't just leave without saying anything, not to her, not to anyone. The police interviewed his friends and family, but no one had any clues. The case grew cold, and Ariana was left with nothing but questions and a heart full of pain. In the months that followed, Ariana struggled to move on. She threw herself into her work, trying to distract herself from the constant ache of not knowing what had happened to Henry. She went to therapy, joined support groups, and even hired a private investigator, but nothing brought her closer to the truth. Eventually, she had to accept that Henry was gone, and she would probably never know why. It was a painful realization, but it was the only way she could begin to heal. Meeting Noah felt like a lifeline. He was everything Henry wasn't: steady, reliable, and emotionally available. Where Henry had been unpredictable, Noah was consistent. Where Henry had been secretive, Noah was open and honest, or so Ariana thought. Noah seemed to understand her pain in a way no one else did, and he never pressured her to talk about Henry unless she was ready. He was patient and kind, and Ariana found herself falling for him faster than she had expected. But there were moments when Noah's behavior made her uneasy. He would sometimes ask about Henry in a way that felt too specific, too calculated. Once, he asked if Henry had any enemies, or if he'd ever mentioned being in trouble. Another time, he brought up Henry's disappearance out of the blue, asking Ariana if she thought he could still be alive. These conversations always left Ariana feeling unsettled, but she told herself Noah was just trying to understand her past. She never imagined that his questions might be hiding a darker motive. As Ariana and Noah's relationship grew more serious, she began to notice other small, strange details. Noah had a habit of changing the subject whenever Henry's name came up, as if the topic made him uncomfortable. He also seemed to know more about Henry's disappearance than he let on, occasionally mentioning details that Ariana hadn't shared with him. When she asked how he knew, he would brush it off, saying he must have heard it from her or read it online. Ariana wanted to believe him, but the inconsistencies nagged at her. Despite her doubts, Ariana pushed them aside, convincing herself that she was overthinking things. Noah loved her, and he had been nothing but supportive. She told herself that her lingering unease was just a result of the trauma she had been through. But as her wedding day approached, that unease grew stronger, like a storm brewing on the horizon. Little did she know, the truth about Henry's disappearance and Noah's role in it was about to come crashing into her life in the most devastating way possible. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect day that seemed tailor-made for a fairy tale ending. Ariana woke up early, her heart fluttering with a mix of excitement and nerves. She had spent months planning every detail of the day, from the elegant lace on her gown to the delicate floral arrangements that would adorn the venue. As she sat in front of the mirror, surrounded by her bridesmaids, she couldn't help but feel a surge of happiness. This was it, the day she would marry Noah, the man who had brought light back into her life after the darkness of Henry's disappearance. The ceremony was set to take place in a picturesque garden, with twinkling lights strung between the trees and a soft breeze carrying the scent of blooming flowers. Ariana's guests arrived in waves, their faces glowing with anticipation. Everyone commented on how radiant she looked, how perfect she and Noah were together. As she walked down the aisle on her father's arm, Ariana felt like she was living a dream. Noah stood at the altar, handsome in his tailored suit, his eyes filled with love as he watched her approach. For a moment, everything felt perfect. But as the ceremony began, Ariana noticed something that made her stomach twist. Noah's best man, a man named Ethan, whom she had never met before, seemed unusually tense. He kept fidgeting, his eyes darting around the crowd as if he were searching for something or someone. Ariana tried to brush it off, telling herself it was just nerves. After all, Ethan was Noah's childhood friend, and standing up in front of so many people could be intimidating. Still, the way he kept glancing at Noah, his expression a mix of anxiety and something else she couldn't quite place, made her uneasy. The officiant began the vows, and Ariana focused on Noah, trying to push her worries aside. But as she listened to him speak, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Noah's voice wavered slightly, and his hands trembled as he held hers. He seemed distracted, his gaze flickering toward Ethan every few seconds. Ariana told herself it was just pre-wedding jitters, but the tension in the air was palpable. Then, just as they were about to exchange rings, Ethan stepped forward abruptly. He leaned in close to Noah, whispering something urgently in his ear. Ariana watched as Noah's face drained of color, his confident demeanor crumbling in an instant. Without a word, Noah turned and walked away from the altar, leaving Ariana standing there in stunned silence. The guests erupted into murmurs of confusion, and Ariana felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. What was happening? Why had Noah left? Ariana's mind raced as she tried to make sense of the situation. She glanced at Ethan, who looked equally shaken, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Without thinking, she stepped down from the altar and followed Noah, her heart pounding in her chest. She found him outside, pacing back and forth near a cluster of trees. Ethan was with him, his voice low but urgent as he spoke. Ariana hid behind a nearby wall, her breath catching as she listened to their conversation. Ethan's words sent a chill down her spine. He was accusing Noah of something terrible. Ariana strained to hear, her heart sinking as the pieces began to fall into place. Ethan mentioned Henry's name, and Ariana's blood ran cold. What did Henry have to do with this? As the conversation continued, the truth began to unravel, each word more shocking than the last. Noah's voice rose in desperation, but Ethan was relentless, his tone sharp and accusing. Ariana's legs felt like they might give out beneath her. She pressed a hand to her mouth to stifle a gasp as the realization hit her. Noah had been hiding something dark and horrifying, and now, on what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, that secret was coming to light. She didn't know what to do or where to turn. All she knew was that her world was about to change forever, and there was no going back. Ariana stood frozen, her back pressed against the cold stone wall, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure Noah and Ethan would hear it. The words she had just overheard echoed in her mind, each one more horrifying than the last. Ethan had accused Noah of killing Henry, and Noah hadn't denied it. Instead, his voice had been desperate, pleading with Ethan to keep quiet, to not ruin everything. Ariana's hands trembled as she tried to process what she had heard. This couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of terrible mistake. But deep down, she knew the truth. The man she was about to marry, the man she had trusted with her heart, was a murderer. Her mind raced, replaying every moment of her relationship with Noah. The way he had always been so curious about Henry, the strange questions he would ask, the times he seemed almost too eager to comfort her about the past. It all made sense now. Noah hadn't been trying to help her heal. He had been trying to cover his tracks, to make sure she never suspected him. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut, and she felt sick. How could she have been so blind? How could she have trusted him? Ariana knew she had to act quickly. She couldn't confront Noah, not here, not now. He was desperate, and desperate people were dangerous. She needed to get away, to call the police, to do something. But her legs felt like they were made of lead, and her mind was spinning. She forced herself to take a deep breath, to focus. Slowly, she peeked around the corner to see if Noah and Ethan were still there. Their voices rising in intensity as they argued. Noah's face was twisted with anger, his hands clenched into fists. Ethan looked equally furious, his words sharp and accusing. "You think you can just move on like nothing happened?" Ethan hissed. You think you can marry her and pretend you're some kind of hero? I know what you did, Noah, and if you don't come clean, I will." Noah's response was low and venomous. "You don't understand. You have no idea what I've been through. I did what I had to do. Henry was a threat to me, to Ariana, to everything. You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to live with this hanging over me?" Ariana's breath caught in her throat. A threat? What did Noah mean? What had Henry done, or what had Noah thought he had done to justify such a horrific act? She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but she knew she couldn't. Not yet. She had to stay hidden, to gather as much information as she could before making her next move. As the argument continued, Ariana noticed something else. Ethan wasn't just angry. He was scared. His hands shook as he spoke, and his eyes darted around as if he were afraid someone might be listening. It was clear that he had been carrying this secret for a long time, and the weight of it was crushing him. But why had he waited until now to confront Noah? Why on her wedding day? The pieces began to fall into place. Ethan had been blackmailing Noah, using the truth about Henry's murder to control him. But something had changed. Maybe the pressure of the wedding had been too much, or maybe Ethan had finally reached his breaking point. Whatever the reason, he had decided to expose Noah, no matter the consequences. Ariana's mind raced as she tried to figure out what to do. She couldn't stay here. It was too dangerous. She needed to get to safety, to call the police, to make sure Noah couldn't hurt anyone else. But as she turned to leave, her foot caught on a loose stone, sending it skittering across the ground. The sound was small, but in the tense silence, it might as well have been a gunshot. Noah's head snapped up, his eyes locking onto hers. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then his expression shifted from shock to something far more terrifying, rage. Ariana didn't wait to see what he would do next. She turned and ran, her heart pounding as she heard his footsteps behind her. The wedding, the guests, the life she had dreamed of, it was all gone. All that mattered now was survival. Ariana ran as fast as she could, her wedding dress tangling around her legs and her breath coming in ragged gasps. The garden, once a place of beauty and celebration, now felt like a maze of danger. She could hear Noah's footsteps behind her, his voice calling her name, but she didn't dare look back. Her mind was a whirlwind of fear and disbelief, but one thought cut through the chaos. She had to get away. She had to survive. She burst through the garden gate and into the parking lot, her eyes scanning desperately for someone, anyone who could help. The guests were still inside, oblivious to the nightmare unfolding just outside. Ariana's phone was in her hand, her fingers trembling as she dialed 911. She barely managed to choke out her location and a frantic plea for help before she heard Noah's voice again. Closer this time. She dropped the phone and kept running, her heels clicking against the pavement as she darted between cars. Noah caught up to her near the edge of the parking lot, his hand grabbing her arm and spinning her around. His face was a mask of desperation, his eyes wild and pleading. "Ariana, wait." "You don't understand," he shouted, his voice cracking. But Ariana wasn't listening. She twisted out of his grip and stumbled backward, her heart pounding as she searched for an escape. Just then, the sound of sirens cut through the air, growing louder with each passing second. Noah froze, his face pale as he realized what was happening. He looked at Ariana, his expression a mix of fear and regret, before turning and running in the opposite direction. Ariana collapsed against a car, her legs giving out as the adrenaline began to fade. She watched as the police cars screeched into the parking lot, officers jumping out and rushing toward her. The next few hours were a blur. Ariana was taken to the police station, where she gave a statement about what she had overheard and what had happened. The officers were kind but firm, their questions sharp and focused. They needed to know everything about Noah, about Ethan, about Henry. Ariana told them everything she could, her voice shaking, as she recounted the horrifying truth she had uncovered. Meanwhile, a manhunt was underway. Noah had fled the scene, but it didn't take long for the police to track him down. He was found hiding in a nearby motel, his wedding suit rumpled and his face streaked with tears. When they arrested him, he didn't resist. He simply looked at the officers and said, "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." Ethan was also taken into custody. He confessed to knowing about Noah's crime and admitted that he had been blackmailing him for years. He explained that he had finally decided to confront Noah on the wedding day because he couldn't bear to see Ariana marry a murderer. He hadn't planned for things to spiral out of control, but he knew he had to do the right thing, even if it meant facing consequences of his own. The media frenzy that followed was overwhelming. Ariana's story made headlines across the country, and she found herself at the center of a national scandal. Reporters camped outside her house, and strangers speculated about her life online. But through it all, Ariana remained strong. She testified against Noah in court, her voice steady as she recounted the events of that terrible day. Noah was sentenced to life in prison for Henry's murder, and Ethan received a lighter sentence for his role in the cover-up. In the months that followed, Ariana worked hard to rebuild her life. She moved to a new town, started a new job, and slowly began to heal. She went to therapy to process the trauma she had been through, and she leaned on her friends and family for support. It wasn't easy, but she was determined to move forward. One day, as she stood on the porch of her new home, watching the sunset, Ariana felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. She would always carry the scars of what had happened, but she had survived. She had faced the truth, no matter how painful, and she had come out stronger on the other side. And though she would never forget the day she found out, on her wedding day, that her fiancé had killed her ex, she knew that her story wasn't over. It was just beginning.